Hello, everyone. Hi, Airsters. If you are joining in a little bit early, we are just saying hello. I'm here with Jennifer Warren from the CBC. We'll be starting in about 10 to 15 minutes. So until then, we just wanted to say hello and we're going to put ourselves on mute. Um, sorry, that was my feedback. And we should be good to go in about 10 minutes. So until then, see you in a sec.
See you soon, guys.
Hi, everyone. This is Kate at AIR. I'm just tuning in a little bit early in case some of you guys are waiting. We're going to start in about 5 to 6 minutes. We're here with Jennifer Warren from the CBC. So just sit tight for a sec and we'll start right in about 5 minutes. Thanks, guys. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this AIRstream exchange with Jennifer Warren from the CBC's Doc Project. We're going to get started in a few minutes, and Jennifer's right there. We're going to get started pretty soon, but I just wanted to say thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. I love that everyone in the network is super enthusiastic and wants to upskill and learn all these great things about improving and enhancing the audio format. So just some logistical notes before we start. I'm going to introduce Jennifer Warren, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what she does at the Doc Project, and then we'll dive into the presentation. And she's going to share her screen, and we'll go through some ideas. And if at any point you would like to ask a question, there are several ways that you can do that. So if you scroll over to the right side of your screen, you'll see a chat box where we've said hello and welcome. If you want to type in a question to ask Jennifer, I will intercept that and ask her directly. And no problem if you want to interrupt and ask like, oh, I have an urgent question right now. That's totally fine. We can go off the cuff. But just a note that you'll need to be signed into a Google account in order to post questions. If that is not feasible or you prefer to be signed out, then you can always tweet me at airmedia, or you can send us an email, join@airmedia.org. So on that note, we've got some great questions already prepared. Some people have sent in their questions, and we'd love to hear some more. So without further ado, let's take it away. Jen, if you want to just introduce yourself, and then when you're ready, you can share your screen.
Yeah,
and I will put myself on mute.
Absolutely. Hey, Kate. Thank you so much for that introduction. Hey, everybody. It is really great to be doing this webinar. Thank you for showing up to it. I'll tell you a little bit about me and about the Doc Project so you have a sense of where I'm coming from. So the Doc Project is a radio show that airs on CBC Radio 1. We also are on Sirius. We also podcast. And we are a show devoted to the art of radio documentary. So we specialize in immersive audio storytelling, if that makes sense. Very audio rich story arcs. We do a very broad range of documentaries on our show. And the way that we get the documentaries differs. Some are our internal CBC people, so we will team up with journalists within the CBC. Sometimes we commission docs from both Canadian and international doc makers. We acquire docs, so docs that sometimes have aired on, let's say, US networks. We acquired one recently from the Australian Broadcasting Network. But typically we are commissioning docs from either Canadian, US, and sometimes international doc makers. So every week we have a half-an-hour show that airs terrestrially twice a week. But we're also part of, not only CBC Radio, but this big digital animal that is CBC Online. So the reason I wanted to talk about, the digital life of radio docs is that with an organization like the CBC, and I would imagine most other media organizations that you might be interested in working for or selling your work to, they have an online life. And I think that sometimes it can be a challenge because when you are making a documentary, an audio documentary, you're so immersed in that audio world and how you're going to tell your story in an audio only space. And in fact, often as a doc maker, you're thinking, okay, how am I gonna paint a picture through audio? And you're really, really immersed in it. I've been there too. I've made radio docs, and I know that it can be a leap to think about, okay, how is this now going to live in the digital space? But it is really necessary. And there are ways to make your presentation very, very effective online. So with that said, I'm going to screen share and we'll go right into a little slideshow here. Okay. Everybody got that? Kate, do you see that too?
Yep, I see it. I think we're good.
Okay. So the digital life of radio docs. What I did for this presentation was I sent Kate two kind of case studies of pretty recent docs that aired on our show that had really successful digital lives, lives that really extended, I think, the reach of the documentaries, and that also enhanced the storytelling aspect, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and play
Jen, sorry, 1 second. For some reason, the screen share isn't actually working from your end. I don't know why that is, but do you want to try that? I can share it from my screen and then you can page through it? Okay, that might work a little bit better. Yeah, that's strange. Let's see. Let me see if that works. Give me 1 second. Okay. How's that?
Let me see here. For me, I'm not seeing you navigate through, Kate.
Okay, let me see. 1 second. Let's see if we can. I want to present to everyone. Let's see if that is working. Still showing Jen your profile pic.
Okay, so let me try going back into, I'm going to unscreen share and then rescreen
Okay.
share. Okay.
Let me see if we can.
And now I'm going into present pages to see.
Yes.
How about now?
Let's present you to everyone. Okay, let me see if that works. Nope, still not. Sorry, guys, hold on. Apologies for the technical difficulties. We'll be able to figure this out. Because I can see your screen, but I can see you, but I can't see your actual screen. So I'm gonna stop presenting you and then let's try one more time. Okay, what if we go through to mine and present there?
Yeah, that's no problem for me. Just let me know where we're at and I can go through on my end.
Okay, yeah. Apologies, guys. I think we'll be able to figure this out. Just one more second. I'm just making sure. Okay, great. Now it works. Now everyone can see my Slack.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna share and then present,
So
and then you can just tell me when to play and page through. Does that work?
amazing. It's just like having, a secretary. I'll be like, please change the slide, Kate. So I wanted to talk about the first doc I wanted to talk about is this documentary that we aired pretty recently, and it touched on two real Canadian, I guess, touchstones that are also very seasonal: black flies and bears. So this documentary is a story told by two former Parks Canada employees who went on a trip a couple of years ago to gather like botanical samples, mushroom samples in a remote part of Canada. And it's about what happens to them when like the plane basically drops them off in this remote part of the country. And they are besieged by two Canadian bugaboos for anybody who has gone camping out in the bush, black flies and bears. So what we did in terms of the social presentation was we really wanted to capitalize on this being like a Canadian experience. And we went pretty campy with the presentation in terms of how we wanted to promote it online. So Kate, go ahead and play the video. So that's our social media video that went out the day that the documentary aired. And if you go to the next slide, Kate, we'll get into some of the highlights of how this post and this video did for us. So it killed, like it did really, really well. And that's, I think, attributed to a few things. It really, when we aired this doc, May 30th, I actually was up north, like in rural Ontario where my parents live, and the black flies were out. So it was about timing. And that was something from the beginning that we decided to time the documentary so that it was on during black fly season, because anybody who's been up in the bush in that time, it's a very unmistakable time of year. But what happened with this short film, this social film, is that it was shared not only on our Facebook page, but it was picked up by our much larger affiliates with much larger digital reach. So it was shared, we shared it on the CBC Doc Project page, but more importantly, it was shared by not only CBC Radio, but then the main CBC page, which really sort of, that massively increased our reach. And then there was also a special, and I didn't even know actually that this Facebook page existed. There was a special CBC page that had been set up to celebrate Canada 150, because we're about to celebrate our sesquicentennial. So it really, I think, capitalized on like Canadian sort of, I guess the feeling of like, not patriotism, because this is about, you know, bears and black flies, but it was, we chose an angle to promote the documentary that really worked online. And it also went viral on Twitter. And I think that, you know, calling it a uniquely Canadian horror story really helped to kind of sell it. And this is important. I'm not sure if any of you had the chance to actually listen to the documentary itself, but the documentary itself doesn't sound anything like the social video. It sounds completely different. It has different scoring. It's a much more gentle documentary, and that's fine. You know, when you're thinking about the digital space versus like the terrestrial space or an audio only space of your doc versus how to take it somewhere that is a visual medium like the web or social media, those are different ponds. So you have to think about, like, if you want to attract people from the digital or social space, you need a different angle or a different way of selling it, if that makes sense. So if we go to the next slide, the things that make sense to focus on when you're, and I would say as a doc maker, to think about this from the moment that you're gathering audio, like when you're out in the field, when you're there with your characters, think about, just have sort of your antennas up for, you know, are there visuals that might be compelling that I should take some photos now, or a short video? Is there a specific way to draw people in? Like, is there a time when we can promote this? And capitalize on any drama, on any, you know, even cliffhangers in the doc, or pivotal moments, or really funny moments. You know, when you're promoting something in the digital space, people are not going to stick around typically for a really long time. So it makes sense sometimes to focus on one specific moment or punchline or character, or like one thing, and choose that thing. So if we move on now to the next slide, Kate.
Yeah, can I ask you a question on that, actually?
Yeah.
So if people are concerned that they don't really know how their story structure is coming together, and they're worried about what they would want to sort of capitalize in the multimedia aspect of it when they're creating this story, is there any suggestion that you can make to them to be thinking sort of as you're making the narrative come together, how you could think about the digital implications?
Yeah, I mean, and I should probably be clear that, you know, as somebody who's commissioning people's docs and somebody who's airing them in you know, on a national radio show, I'm not expecting the doc makers to come to me with a complete digital treatment. I'm really not. But what can help a lot is that when we're thinking about the digital treatment, that the doc maker isn't like, oh, I didn't think of actually taking any, photos of that main character in the doc, like where, like that's such a missed opportunity. I think that anybody who is a storyteller has those moments of like those aha moments where even if you don't know exactly what your narrative arc is going to be yet, you're out there gathering and you're like, oh, I got to take a photo of this. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? You don't use it. Like, it's kind of like when you're building a doc and you're gathering hours and hours and hours of tape, and maybe you're cutting it down to like 20 minutes. It's the same kind of instinct where it's just to, as I said, have those antenna up. It's like be thinking on that other plane at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just set up the next video that I'm going to show. So very, very different in tone and very different in subject matter to the first one that we got into. So this one is a very personal documentary. It actually came out of our mentorship program, as well as leading the Doc Project radio show. I also lead a mentorship program within the CBC in which fledgling audio producers, people who have like some audio gathering experience, but have never made a long form doc, can pitch a documentary and be teamed up with a mentor within the CBC to make their doc. And we're trying to build the next generation of audio storytellers at the CBC in doing so. So this documentary and this social video came out of the mentorship program. So this was a first time a doc maker named Rignam Wankong, who is Tibetan Canadian. And the story he wanted to tell was about his late father, who in the 1970s was one of Canada's first, I think in fact he was the first off the plane, first Tibetan refugee. And as I said, Rignam's dad died before Rignam was really able to talk to him about the experience, but the father did leave a kind of unpublished memoir. And in the documentary, Rignam goes back to his home and finds the memoir and actually has his uncle read passages from the memoir as Rignam is discovering it. So it's a really very personal, very beautiful documentary. And so we can show you now the video and what we did to promote it.
By the second day, there were more than 100 people in their group. The others had been able to bring yaks, donkeys, cows, clothes, and food. His family were the only ones who didn't have food or bedding. My Bala writes how navigating through the mountains felt like sleepwalking. They were drifting in and out of consciousness, and no one knew which way to go. It was while he was in this state of semi-consciousness that my Bala became separated from the group. Sometime during the night, I must have slept, and when I woke up, there was no one around me. I screamed, calling Bala and Amma, but could not hear any sound other than wind blowing. I walked all night, and when sun came up, I was on top of a rocky mountain. No matter what direction I looked, all I could see were snowy mountains. I was completely lost. All of a sudden, a crow showed up and flew around and around over my head. After a while, he took off, so I went in the direction the crow had flown.
So he kept following this crow, and the crow would fly away, and then he wait for him and then keep flying.
After about 15 minutes walk, I could see a person walking towards me.
I don't know if the video just dropped out for me there right at the end, but I definitely saw, I don't know if everybody else saw the same amount I did. You definitely get the sense of what we did here. So a few things that we did a bit differently with this video. Rignum was able to give us a lot of photos. The photos, there's a few family photos in this video from Rignum. And there's also a bit of video footage of Rignum at the Tibetan Canadian Cultural Centre in Toronto. He had a friend film him just while he was visiting the cultural centre. That's like, him visiting the cultural centre is maybe 1 minute of the documentary, but he thought to have his friend just take like a video of him with those beautiful like carousels in that moment. So, you know, he gave us a lot of material, and that allowed us to really get into a richer digital treatment. Then the other, I don't know if everybody else saw to the end, but right at the end, we also are crediting a number of photographers. So we have photos from the Wangkang family, from Rignum's family, and we also have photos from Getty that we used of like the Tibetan mountains, just to create the atmosphere and the ambiance. So what we did here was, I don't know if anybody was able to see the actual episode page online for this doc, but in the video, we use, as I said, some photos with Rignum, but also in the episode page for the doc, so like literally where the doc lives online, there's a feature that Rignum wrote about the experience, and there's a ton of photos in there too that give you a sense of Rignum's late father, and so you get this ability to be reciprocal in your promotion, meaning that we knew going into the broadcast of the show, when we were scripting it and when our host was like voicing it, we knew what the digital presentation was going to be. And so we were able to have AC, our host, AC Rose, say, you know, go online, you're going to want to see these photos, like including one where Rignum's dad met the then Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Like we had some fantastic photos. And so we were able to throw to the digital aspect and not have that be like a disingenuous kind of promotional thing. It's not that at all. It's actually enhancing the radio doc.
Whoops. Are you back?
I'm back. I was going on and on. I'm so sorry, guys. I dropped out without knowing it. When did I drop out, Kate?
You were talking about the promotional aspect.
Okay. Like, can you be more specific?
Yeah, you were saying how the people involved were really excited and were like really about sending this out on their end.
Okay, so the thing that was, if we go to the next slide, if you're not already there, Kate.
Yes, let me reshare because we had to drop you back out. Let's see. And then if we can go to... Okay, can you see the slide?
No, but that's okay. I can follow using my own...
Okay.
I can follow using my own like slideshow. That's fine.
Sure. Yeah, I think that works.
Yeah. What I was saying, and I don't like, Kate, just stop me if I'm totally repeating myself, is I was trying to say that what was interesting here was that we knew what the digital presentation was going to be out of the gate. And so we were able to have our host throw to that on the show, right? So throw people to the website and say, you have to go, here are some specific like photos that we have online. And it allowed there to be an enhanced experience, if that makes sense, where people could go from that audio only space to like a very real and a very valuable visual space. So if we go to the digital results, which I guess you're on now, Kate, The thing that was interesting about this video, so if we go back to the Black Flies and Bears, that one had about it has to date about 66K views just for that video online, which for us is huge. The Rignum Wankung's social video had 47K views, so, you know, less, but still pretty amazing for us. The thing that I found really interesting about Rignum's doc was the engagement. It had a tremendous number of shares. Like, so many people shared this video. So out of the 47K, there were 514 shares just from when we posted it, not even counting when CBC Radio posted it. And that number of shares really, like for Facebook, that's a really big number. And it really demonstrated to me that what was going on was that there was a feeling of belonging. Like people saw the video, and there was a huge community of Tibetan Canadians who Rignum was well plugged into through his family. So he was able to help us reach those communities who saw it and just felt like their story was being told. Like they felt such a kind of a powerful feeling of belonging with the story. And as a result, like weeks later, I was getting Facebook updates saying that, you know, what were some of the examples? Like the United Nations of Tibetan Canadians shared your post. You know, there was like the Feminist Buddhist Collective of Canada shared your post. It kind of went on, and it took on this life amongst like refugee communities, amongst Tibetan Canadian communities, larger Tibetan communities, Buddhist communities. So the engagement for this one was like off the charts. We didn't know it was going to be like this, but I think because we were coming at it from the same attitude as the doc was made in, and because we were valuing this story, it resonated and it connected. So if we move on to the next slide.
Just to interject, I'm finding that the slides are not showing up, but I think that's fine. I don't think that the slides are the most important part of this. Yeah, just something about Google is not playing with us today.
It really isn't.
But yeah.
That's okay. So yeah, like this Rignum's video is probably the longest social media video we've ever done. It clocks in at about 2 minutes, 15 seconds. Typically a social media video should be maybe a minute, like a minute 30 tops. But we felt that this one, because it just had a slower feel to it, we felt it warranted a longer treatment. But what makes sense to focus on is like, okay, you know, this is part of in this case, this was part of a 23-minute doc. Right? We're pulling 2 minutes, and that is actual audio with the scoring and the music from the doc, which we asked Rignum to deliver to us as well, so that we could just score rescore, have the isolated voice track and rescore it with the music from the doc. So that's also something to think about, is to keep those component pieces before you mix, and just keep them to the side in case any digital producers you're working with, or in case you decide that you want to create something that is like a piece of it, but you know, so that people have that capability. Can
I ask you a question on that, Jen, actually?
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you're suggesting to store these pieces of audio or something that you can remix, would you consider that as something you would like to see if you're receiving a pitch, that the producer has all of their audio sort of saved like that, or just a sort of a note that says, I would be like very excited to remix this if the case may be, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so like in our case, we don't actually ask, like for a digital presentation, we would never ask the doc maker, unless they're like, look, I really want to do the mix for the social video. We would never ask them to do that. We're doing it in-house. But what I'm saying is that it can be really helpful to have in these kinds of cases, because we're producing our own thing here. We're producing this little video. It can be really helpful to have the isolated voice track, let's say. Like, right. So like if we have the clip that we want, it can be helpful to have that isolated, and then to have the scoring isolated, so that we can create our own sort of arc and soundscape, if that makes sense, rather than it just being like an excerpt. It can just create a nicer and more polished feeling.
That's great. Also, because it sort of takes the pressure off of the producers. I know a lot of the producers in the AIR network, they love being radio and audio producers, and they're potentially concerned about having to, think of all of the pieces of the puzzle at once when they're creating this doc. So it's reassuring to know that you guys can do that in-house and that that's sort of common practice.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's just about having those pieces of the puzzle so that if that's what we end up using, it'll just be that much easier and that much nicer, the final result, to have like isolated audio tracks. So yeah, that's just something to think about when you're producing, is to keep like a clip bin or wherever you're going to keep just your isolated tracks, like pre-mixed, or keep, if it's a project version, keep it as a project version before you mix it down. So in the case, going back to Rignum's doc, whereas if you look at the Black Flies and Bears, and that's a very kind of, what we played upon there was a kind of Canadian patriotism, or a feeling of like, oh boy, that's so Canadian. Everybody knows what that's like. Everybody who's camped has a black bear story, or like anybody who's been out in the bush has a black fly story. Well, everybody in Canada does not have a story of how their father escaped, like, through the mountains. But what was interesting here was that the communities to whom it spoke really picked up on it. And so it's about targeting as well the communities for whom the content might resonate. Rignum helped us a lot with that, because through making the documentary, his father was actually a kind of a de facto Tibetan ambassador. He was like the first one to come to Canada. So Rignum was able to help us by sharing those contacts and saying, you should send it here, I'll send it there, etc. So it's just thinking about like who isn't listening to this on whatever show I've sold the doc to, who else out there is going to be really interested in it, and how can I somehow reach them? And it's just about, and also, I really want to underline that for us, our show is a very authentic show. It's about real storytelling. It's about truth. And our digital presentation, even if we're taking a tongue-in-cheek take on something like with the Black Flies and Bears, we're not doing it's not promotional. It's part of the overall piece. It's part of the overall offering, and it's enhancing the radio doc. So I want to sort of go on to playing a little bit of, devil's advocate. What if you're not a photographer? What if you just you are an audio producer, that's what you do, or you have done a doc that really you don't have any images for, you just do not. It's something that happened a long time ago in the past. There's no images. It doesn't lend itself well to video. It's about an abstract concept, like let's say boredom, and there's nothing really specific that could sell it visually. Well, there's other things you can do. So there's another doc that we aired pretty recently that did very well for us online, and I was surprised by that. It did very well for us online, and it was a doc that we didn't have a lot of visuals for. We didn't have a lot of visuals for it because it was about 3 women who left the Mormon church in Canada, in a very, very, very small community. And 2 out of 3 of them wanted to be anonymous. So as a result, we had some photos of one of the women, but we didn't have photos of any of the other women. And we just the photos just were photos of kind of, here's 2 ladies at the Mormon church picnic. And it didn't speak to what these women were actually saying in the doc. It just didn't work. And so what we ended up doing was we created a quote board. Some of you might know that as a quote graphic. It's when you are online and you see a photo, and over top of the photo there's a quote, there's text. So we have a picture, a photograph of one of the Mormon churches in the region that the doc is based, and we've kind of faded it out. It's kind of been whited out a little bit, and over top of it is a quote from the doc that one of the women says. She says, "Is this Christ's church? Or is this the church of white men in suits and ties, discriminating and calling it revelation?" And when I heard her say that in my first listen through of the doc, I was like, ding, 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 ding. Like I wrote it down immediately, because like, you know, a good quote when you hear it. And I was like, that is a great quote. It was really powerful. It appeals to anyone who questions religion, or anyone who comes from perhaps a background where their religion did not provide them with the support they wanted or needed. And so, you know, we attribute it to Jane, in quotes, a former member of the Mormon Church. And then we use that online to throw to the documentary. So in the display text, let's say on Facebook, we say a short line of text, and then we throw to the actual web page where you can listen to the documentary. So this was an example where, you know, for whatever reason, maybe your digital producers or maybe the team just doesn't have time to do like a big video treatment. We don't do a video every time around. They're huge amounts of work and they have to warrant it. So in this case, it was like, we didn't have the time, we didn't really have the visuals, and there was nothing sticking out at us to like make a video. So we went, you know what, we'll just make this quote graphic. We've got this one really great quote. That's just one quote from like a 23-minute doc from one of 3 women. That's all we did. You know, then we did like a web page that has a bit of a longer feature and that links to the audio. But this really pulled people in. So this is an example of something you can do. It might be that one of the people in your docs says something amazing or astounding or surprising, or something that is in some way universal, or that will make people go, yeah, I'm going to share that. I understand that quote. That speaks to me. There's other things you can do that I've been seeing online and that I think are super smart. You can do audiograms. Which is basically when it's like you have an audio clip, but you just have a little visual representation of what that audio kind of looks like. It looks like a wave file type of thing. You can do little animations. We've done some animations before that have worked really, really well for us. If, you know, let's say you're either depicting like characters who don't exist, you want to recreate a scene, but you can't through photos or video because the scene has already happened in the past. You can make an animation of it, or like that's something that we do in-house. It's a lot of work once again, but it can work really, really well. So I'm just going to kind of like move on to sort of the key takeaways here. I think it's really important to say that, you know, in my playground right now, I'm all about audio documentaries. That is our wheelhouse. That is what the Doc Project is. That is who we are. But we're also in a media organization, in the case of the CBC, that is moving towards a digital first strategy. And that's the way everybody is moving. So it's about just acknowledging that and starting to think on more than one plane at once, if that makes sense. Start to think about the fact that web users have different habits than people who are sitting in front of their radio or who are sitting with their earbuds in listening to your doc on a podcast. They engage differently, and the overall point is to try to bring people to your doc, or failing that, at the very least, to enhance your brand. So to increase awareness of who you are as a doc maker, to get people to like perk up and go like, oh yeah, I saw something really interesting about that Mormon church thing. Yeah, I think it was a doc on the Doc Project. Like, it's just to sort of, it's to realize that people who are on social media, let's say on the bus, the chances that they're going to click through and listen to a full, like a really long documentary on the bus are pretty slim, but they might do it later. They might talk to somebody about it. And we do find that our numbers increase when we have a really strong digital presence. And then the other thing that happens is people start liking you on Facebook, they start following you on Twitter, and it's like you're just getting a larger audience. So the thing about digital is that the rules can change and can be broken all the time. So think outside the box. What might work for one doc is not going to work for another doc, and just try stuff out. And if it doesn't work the first time, try something different. You know, it's malleable, and the internet has a very short memory. And when you're pitching to a media outlet, see what they're doing digitally. Like if it's a specific show you're pitching to, see what they've done in the past and what they're doing right now. and see if you can come up with just some ideas, or when you go to pitch your doc, say like, I have some shots of, like we had a great one recently that was about an amateur wrestling league called the Prairie Wrestling Alliance that meet monthly in a senior center. And the journalist was like, I have some action shots of the wrestling. I have some pictures of the two super fans who I want to talk about in the doc. Great. Immediately, we know as you know, as a media outlet, we're putting that out there. We're putting some wrestling shots out there, and that's going to be a great way to increase the reach. So I think that's kind of it for me, but I am very happy to talk more, to take questions. If anybody wants to jump in, feel free.
Thank you, Jen. This has been incredible. I am hearing a little bit of my own voice echoing, so I'll make it fast.
I'm not though, Kate.
Okay. So I have a few questions. First of all, what are your considerations for formatting and designing a multimedia story so it's compelling on like different size screens, for example? So for mobile or desktop, etc.
Yeah.
What would you say is the best way to go about that?
So it really depends on like the media outlets, kind of like their web platform, like what they're using. You know, we have been playing around a little bit with actually square images. So like whether we're doing a video or like a quote graphic or even photos, making them square, because typically that works better on mobile. And for a while, right, that was like the Instagram default, but now Instagram has started allowing for horizontal images.
Right.
On the CBC's platform, our default is like a 16:9 ratio horizontal image. And so just usually due to exigency and due to like time, we will do everything in 16:9. Like we will do all of our images in that ratio, and then it will be cropped to become square when it needs to, like for mobile, et cetera. And like there's ways that we can frame it. So it's really, I would say, try different things. More and more people have been experimenting with square, just because like if you know that people tend to engage with your content or with the media organization you're selling to, like on a mobile app, I would say like for sure try square. But typically, like then if we just go back to like you being an audio gatherer, a producer, just get high res shots, take a bunch. You know, like don't just take one photo, like take several photos and really get in there, and like take a lot and have them be nice and high res. So that's something I can say. I would say, you know, there's some really good online resources for just taking photos with your cell phone that are really effective. Some, like if you want to think about, let's say if we go back to a quote board treatment, you know, where we have like a quote, you know, on an image, what can work really nicely for that is if we have a photo of, let's say, the subject of the documentary. If we have a photo of them where their head is kind of off to the side, like where they're in front of a backdrop, it could be the sky, it could be a lake, it could be a building, whatever, but where their head is kind of off to the side, so that what we can do is then screen beside them and put the quote there, right? Instead of it being like kind of a close cropped like headshot of the person. It's like, there's not much we can do, and from a design standpoint, aside from just have it be a close crop picture of the person. So it's like, I think a lot of it is to, when you're online as like a Facebook user or an Instagram user, look at the things that sort of catch your eye and what the people are doing. But it can just be some very simple things where it's like you're taking a photo of the subject of your documentary, you just tilt your camera over a little bit or have them go stand over in front of that mural or that whatever, just so that you get maybe something that could be used in another way.
Great. That's super helpful. And I know that some of our producers have expressed interest in knowing, and I think you covered this mostly, about like the other strategies for sourcing images for an audio story. If you yourself have, you know, say you weren't in the field and the reporter didn't take pictures while there or something, what are the other places that you ought to look for images? Like, can you use you know, stock images? Can you, like, what do you guys do when you're sort of strapped for that and you don't want to go to the route of the animations or the audiograms and you actually want to use an image?
Yeah, we do that. And like for sure, you need some sites in your kind of like trick bag. There's a few sites I like. You can simply Google search like royalty free, like copyright free photos. You'll get sites like I really like a site called Unsplash. In my previous job, where I was just like a straight digital editor for CBC Books, which is the like literary side of the CBC, I did a lot of quote graphics. Like I would take, it would be like the, Alice Munro's top 10 quotes on writing, right? So I would build a post where it would be just 10 quote boards, and then we would push those quote boards out on social. And I would use sites like Unsplash all the time. They're copyright free photos. You can use them for anything. I'm trying to think of like, you can also do a Google search for if your doc has any kind of a historical angle, like, or something where, I don't know, let's say you're talking about when your mom and dad met back in the 1960s and you want some sort of evocative image of that time, you can Google search like copyright free historical photos. There's tons of sites that offer that stuff for free and that you can use. And it's really about setting that kind of tone and that atmosphere for your material. And
awesome.
then in terms of if you're like a hustler and you want to actually like create quote graphics and all that stuff, there's tons of online free ways to do that. Like Canva is a good example, Canva. That's like just a web-based software where you can go, like you have to create an account, or at least I think you do. I have one, it's free. You can create quote graphics, you can create like posters, you can create like all of that kind of stuff. Piktochart is another really great one. That's Pikto chart, Piktochart. So there are a lot of resources out there, and I'm really not very good at design. I'm pretty clunky and untalented, and I don't know my way around Photoshop to save my life.
Same.
Like I am terrible. I've tried to learn like Photoshop more times than I can count, and I've just thrown it out the window because that's not what I do. I'm not a graphic designer, but I can go onto Canva, pop a photo in there, put some text on it, and bing, bang, boom. Like you've got yourself a quote graphic. So
super.
And that might be something that you decide to do. Like in the case of doc producers who, like if you want to promote your doc your own way, like even if you sold it to someone else, but you want to promote it your own way, maybe you're going to want to do that. Like that's something you can do, and it's pretty easy. And I really mean this from the heart. I'm not good at this kind of thing, and I'm saying it is pretty easy to do.
Great. I have 2 more questions coming in. So let's ask you first, from Airster Todd is wondering, have you had success using original source documents on social?
Original source documents. I'm not sure I understand what that means. Do you, Kate?
Okay. Let's have Todd clarify, and then we can move on to the second question, and then maybe Todd can clarify a little bit, and I'll re-ask it because I'm a little bit fuzzy on that as well. But just about working with the CBC in general, I know that a lot of our producers are based in the US, so some people are wondering, working with you guys and in Canada in general, do you have any general insights about things to know if you want to work or pitch your story to outlets over across the border?
Right. I mean, from a CBC standpoint, I would just say, like, do your homework in terms of the scope of the different shows and know what shows are going to be interested and what shows are not. There are some shows within the CBC that have an international reach or that have a reach that extends beyond Canada, like ours. So, a lot of our docs are Canadian and are by Canadian doc makers, but some are not. And, so we are a good place to pitch your doc that is not a Canadian topic. But there's a show that airs daily called The Current, which is really about sort of current affairs, and they do a lot of international stuff. So, if you're stationed somewhere where something is going on that's making like headlines, or that is in some way in the zeitgeist, they're a great person to pitch to. Like they're a great show to pitch to. So I think, in terms of pitching, I think that you actually offered at the end of your slideshow, Kate, like a link to our pitch, like our pitch guide for the doc project. We also have an unofficial CBC radio pitch guide that we drew up on the doc project, where we talked to the commissioning producers for a number of different CBC shows.
Oh, cool.
and talk
Great.
to me
I
about.
will, sorry, I was just going to say, I'll send out all of those resources, by the way, at the end of this presentation,
Yeah.
along with the slides. So that'll be all set for you guys.
I think that, like, I think the most important thing that we notice in terms of pitching that can be absent is, for our show anyway, people will pitch us a topic rather than a documentary. Like, they'll say, I really want to do a documentary about a heroin clinic that's opened up in this specific city. And then they'll just give us a bunch of facts about the heroin clinic. But what I want to know is, what are we going to hear in the documentary? Who are we talking to? What's happening at the heroin clinic right now? Why are we telling this story right now? What surprises are going to happen? Where are we going to go? What are the scenes? It's to really give me a sense of that as a freelancer, that you've thought out how is it going to sound. Like, if your doc hinges on a specific character, include an audio clip of that character. Get a short clip, even a phoner, and send me a short clip so I know that person is a good talker. Because I'm not going to commission a doc from someone where I have actually no idea. Like, let's say it's about a very specific character. I need to hear that character. I need to know not only that they're on board, but that they can warrant me spending the money on this doc, and our listeners spending the time with that person.
Yep, I totally agree. And that's the sort of compelling narrative arc that you're looking for anyway. So cool. I got clarification from Todd. So we have about 5 minutes left, so we can have this and any other questions that come in sort of nearing the end of the presentation. But so Todd was asking about historical documents and how they perform on social.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'm trying to think of whether that has. Okay, so I guess what I would say is, so let's say somebody presented that to me, and it hasn't happened yet. There was a doc I made where I could have done that, though, now that I'm thinking about it, where I had some maps and stuff that could have been helpful. Mm-hmm. I would say that in the social space, probably just because of the size, like, let's say somebody's looking at it on their mobile device, it really, you have to think about, like, what's that going to look like? Are people going to be able to even make out what it is, type of thing? But maybe on the web page for the doc, if you're able to, like, if it's high res enough that you can upload it as a slideshow, like pretty high res and like large resolution, then maybe that could be helpful. And once again, that's one of those things where if it's really useful to the documentary, if it enhances the documentary, then that's something that can be a selling point. Where, on our show, for example, in the extra, the host can say, you're going to want to go online to cbc.ca/the-doc-project to see the map that she's talking about, because you would never believe how close together this, you know what I mean? Like, that's, you have to obviously make sure that there's permissions, or that if there are permissions involved, that you've received those permissions. But I don't see it hindering it, but I wouldn't make it like the lead image for the documentary. Like, meaning, I wouldn't make that be the image that you hope people will stop at when they're scrolling through their Facebook feed. I would make that a deeper dive sort of value added that exists in the digital space for the doc, like on the episode page on that media outlet's website.
Great. That's great feedback. We have another question coming in, and this is from Airster John, who says, I've heard from fellow producers that CBC's pitching process is pretty opaque and a little clubby. Do you have any recommendations for getting a pitch through to editors for the first time? I know that there are often questions about pitching, and we can definitely, Jen, I know that you could take a whole nother webinar to talk about this. But just any sort of general insights on like the coming into the process of the first time, maybe not even specific to the CBC, but just sort of their process and your process about like looking at first time people.
I really like the term clubby. I'm imagining like us all with like in like a disco club, like with drinks, like like with cocktails. So I can't speak to all of CBC, and I can't speak to that because we're a big organization, and because, to be frank, this is the first radio show within CBC that I have worked on. As I said before, I was a digital producer before heading up this show. So I don't have a lot of a lot more to offer in terms of like what within the CBC in general is like. I can say that when you pitch to our show, what I do is I forward it immediately to our in-house doc editor and our associate producer. And between the three of us, we decide on next steps, like based on what that first email is. And, you know, we judge each doc based on the merit of the doc. Opaque. Maybe it is opaque. And I can't comment one way or the other. I think what would be important is to contact the specific show that you think your doc has a chance on, rather than one thing that really burns us as producers, and it's happened to me as a regional producer and as a national producer, is when people blanket pitch. I hate that. Like they'll send a pitch to like a whole bunch of different people, and then lo and behold, like you're about to commission it, and you just so happen to be at the microwave with like somebody else at lunch, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm commissioning this doc about like this chess club that started up in Syria, and you're like, what now? Because you're about to commission that doc from the same person. So I mean, transparency goes both ways. We've definitely had doc makers kind of like double dip or try to, not realizing that the same doc airing nationally twice is not a good thing. It's a bad thing, and people will complain. And I mean listeners, not necessarily producers. But I mean, I guess further to that, if there's like specific, you know, questions you have, like for sure, like get in touch with me. I can hopefully steer you in the right direction. And that's kind of all the context I can give, I'm afraid. I'm not an old timer in CBC radio, so I don't know how things used to go.
Well, I think that's more than enough information. And just a side note on that, John, who asked the original question, says, haha, smoke-filled back rooms about the clubby atmosphere. So
you know what? I know that back in the day it was smoke-filled and all of the studios were smoke-filled. I have heard the voice from the old-timers. So we've nailed that. And I'm sure there was probably some alcohol as well.
Yes, I'm sure. All right, well, I think that's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much, Jen, for being with us. Really appreciate you taking the time to walk through all of our questions and these case studies. It's been really fruitful, I know, for me. But everyone says thank you, and I will just sign off by saying that all of this information is going to be up on the Air Daily. We'll have the video that's recorded, and then I will include the slides as well for the people who didn't get to see the beginning, and also when it dropped off in the middle and we only got to see Jen's beautiful face. So this will also be available through the CBC network. Jen said she's going to communicate it out through them. So thank you so much again. And if you have any questions, you can email me and or Jennifer, and we will be sure to answer it in a timely manner. So thank you and appreciate it. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, we're off.